This spring in Northwoods, I was kind of finalizing. I've been working on some, finalizing some spring plans this last couple of weeks, and it occurred to me earlier this week, like, oh, I should maybe like just offer people the opportunity to hear what's going on. One of the things that I would like us to get better at is kind of giving people more advance notice about what's coming up. So I thought I would try that. So I mentioned earlier in the service that this question keeps coming up in different contexts. If this is how it is, how do we respond? And that really could be like a question that it's a very open-ended question that is universally applicable, which is probably why it keeps coming up. But a lot of times I think we spend a lot of time talking about like what's wrong, what we wish could be different. And the truth is sometimes we have to accept things the way they are and then choose how to respond. It helps us stay out of reactive space, right? And then put another way, what does it look like to go out into this world and be a Unitarian Universalist in your particular context? And just looking around this room, I know enough of your context to think that like, wow, you guys probably have some really good answers to this question. And I hope we'll keep asking that question and not giving people opportunities to answer it and share their answers with each other. So one of the ways we respond is we learn together. I had a lot of success with braiding sweetgrass. Apparently some of Anne's relatives are getting it for Christmas. Probably not the only one. I think Pam has given it to at least like a dozen people. And so we're gonna keep trying the read along with the Rev idea. So the first book we're gonna use is The New Saints, From Broken Hearts to Spiritual Warriors from Lama Rod Owens. I've done some meditation groups that he has sort of facilitated. Not personally, they were video, but I really like his style, and I really appreciate the idea of bringing Black and queer identity to Buddhism and sort of the intersection of how those things come together. I expect there's a lot of talking about what do we do in the face of suffering, because that is the central question, one of the questions of Buddhism, and certainly a question that I've heard from a lot of Black and brown folks. So we watched a short video from Lama Rod and just a short quote. He says, saints are ordinary and human, doing things any person can learn to do. Our era calls for saints who are from this time and place, speak the language of this moment, and integrate both social and spiritual liberation. I believe we all can and must become new saints. And this idea of saints, it intrigues me also because I grew up Catholic, and I'm like, ooh, a different way of thinking about this notion of saints. Cool, I'm in. So I'll be scheduling probably 3 or 4 different sessions that people can come to for conversation about this book in January and early February. So this will be like sort of the first book that we dig into. And then the second one, which I also mentioned in the service, is Dancing in the Darkness, Spiritual Lessons for Thriving in Turbulent Times from Reverend Dr. Otis Moss III, who has certainly seen his share of those. He has been the lead minister at Trinity since Reverend Jeremiah Wright. And so he's been doing that for a couple of decades now. And it's generally considered to be one of the leading Black theologians in contemporary times. So I've enjoyed what I've read so far, and I'm looking forward to the sort of a different perspective from a person who has a very different spirituality than mine, but also a very similar spirituality to mine, right? The work for justice and liberation is very much central, but also from a very traditional African-American church culture and tradition. So I think both of those things are going to be useful for answering that question for us. If this is how it is, how do we respond? I'll probably do a third book, but I haven't quite decided what it is. I may use the Rebecca Parker quote, a book that I quoted earlier. It may be something else. I figure March is too far away to know for sure, right? Don't want to plan too hard, yeah. Yes. So we learn together, we gather and worship. So in answering this question of if this is how it is, how do we respond? What does it mean to be a UU in our contexts? Worship is one of the ways we will answer that. So how do we respond as a community? How do we respond as spiritual beings? And how do we respond on a theological level? What does our sense of divinity, what does God have to say about how things are and how we respond? So in January, we will, our themes are commit, connect, and covenant. So what lies at the heart of the Unitarian Universalist community? Our covenant, the promises we make each other, our commitment, the trust we find in each other, and our connections, the way we make mistakes and the way we repair relationships. These are kind of the things that we'll be digging into a little bit more in January in worship and conversation. In February, we will be looking at spiritual nourishment for when the world is falling apart. That's what I have titled it anyway. I hear from many people often that there's this sense of terrible things are happening. There's a certain level of inevitability. People who are in the know about climate change tell us that many of the benchmarks at which we would have had to turn around our behavior are in the past, which means that things will probably get worse before they get better, not just in terms of the climate, but also in terms of how humans respond to crises. So what does spiritual nourishment look like in these particular times? They're not the hardest times the world has ever seen, maybe. They're certainly not the only hard times the world has ever seen. But here are the questions that we're going to be asking. How do we stay grounded and connected to our spirits? I'm not quite sure what all I'm going to say, but I'm definitely going to be talking about sacred rest and the idea that we do not always have to be active and doing in order to be worthy beings. We're going to be talking about honoring the shadow, kind of in keeping with what we talked about earlier in the service. And we're going to be talking about community care. We talked a lot about self-care, but there's this corollary idea of community care and the notion that if we are in need of things, it's not just from ourselves that we find them in community, and we find them from others. And then how do we respond theologically? So our theme in March is a universe of abundance. Theologically, we can respond to these times with a message of having enough. In what shall we place our trust? This month will include some themes of abundance and appreciation. We live in a culture that is very much focused on scarcity, lack, and want. And our liberal theology gives us another way of looking at the world that is focused on abundance and appreciation of the generous gifts that the world has offered to us. Those of you who were in the Blessing or Braided Sweetgrass group have already been talking about some of this. And we're also going to be celebrating shared ministry and generosity. This is kind of our stewardship season in which we are asking folks to review their pledging and think about how they want to be involved in the church in the coming year. And we're preparing to make our budget, which we will present in May to the congregation. So it's a good time to think about things like gratitude and generosity and the beauty of shared ministry, which is definitely an exponential multiplier in terms of what I'm able to do. And an expression of abundance, because this is a very generous congregation in terms of its time and its creativity, not just its financial resources. And shared ministry is how we live that out. So these are going to be sort of our worship questions, our worship themes for the first few months of the year. And I'm excited to share those with people, and I'll probably keep talking about them. If this is how it is, how do we respond? This is a quote from Susan Frederick Gray, who was for 3 years the president of the Unitarian Universalist Association. And it was in response to some of the anti-racism work and the Black Lives Matter engagement that we were doing. This is no time to go it alone. This is still no time to go it alone. And I'm not just talking about Northwoods, right? This is no time to go it alone. Who are the people in our neighborhood? I'm one of the things I'm hoping to start doing more of now that I am the settled minister is to start building some more connections with the larger community, other spiritual institutions, etc. So I have some plans. I have gotten back involved with Faiths Together, which is an interfaith organization that operates here in the Woodlands. You've probably heard of Interfaith of the Woodlands, which is a very large, very successful, very effective organization. Faiths Together is kind of an offshoot of Interfaith of the Woodlands and also kind of independent of the, I'm not totally sure what the relationship is. But they put on an interfaith Thanksgiving service every November, and they meet throughout the year to support each other and to sort of advertise opportunities for interfaith relationships and between congregations and other communities. And it's not just, it's UUs as well as Christian churches, as well as Jewish synagogues. The Baha'is are represented, Muslim community of the Woodlands, the Hindu community of the Woodlands, the Buddhist community of the Woodlands. So it's a truly interfaith group. And it's a really nice thing to be a part of. I've enjoyed going to the meetings, and I'm going to hopefully start encouraging, hopefully I can encourage a few people to join me in those meetings. We are also planning a joint worship service with Woodlands Community Church, otherwise known as our literal neighbors, two churches down. We've got the Woodlands, it's the Disciples of Christ Church. They have a brand new minister, Dr. Amber Mattingly, who I have met with a few times. A seminary friend of mine was in a program with her and connected us. So she's really cool. She's interested in working on their open and affirming process and become more LGBTQ friendly. But we're going to be doing a worship service, hopefully in Tamarack Park, followed by a joint park cleanup day. So I think that'll be fun. One of the things I've always wondered about since I got here is there's this row of churches. What's our relationship to them? So I'm looking forward to building a relationship in the hyper local sense. And I'm also working on gathering the local LGBTQ inclusive faith communities for mutual support, for collective action, for celebration, for potlucks, whatever we want to do together. I don't really know. But when I went to the Pride event this year, when we went the first year, which was my first year here as a developmental minister, I think we were the only religious organization represented. And this year there were almost a dozen. 8 or 9 church faith communities in the Woodland Spring area, and a couple of others from outside of that. And I have a lot of I got contact information from as many as I can, because there are that many of us. We could be a thing. That's what I said to every booth. I was like, guys, there are a lot of us. We could be a thing. I don't know what kind of thing, but we could be a thing. And they were pretty excited about it. So I feel like that's where there's definitely energy in that area in this congregation. And it sounds like there's energy for this work in other congregations as well. So the things that we can do that remind us that we are not the only ones who are working towards our shared values and our shared commitments to justice and equity and all those good things. We are not alone. We are not the only ones working on these things. We are not the only ones who share these values and these commitments. And when we know we're not alone, we can find our courage a little more easily as a community and as individuals. So looking forward to building some connections within the larger Woodlands area. And the other thing that I expect to see a lot of this spring is conversation. I have been meeting with all of these groups, the board, membership committee, stewardship circle. HCT stands for our Healthy Congregations Team, which is a small group that people can go to if they're struggling with conflict, but also that kind of looks at the health of the congregation as a whole. And then also people who are working with our justice groups in reference to the 8th principle. I had some conversations. All of these groups are having conversations about how we should be having conversations about things. So I expect in the spring there's going to be a lot of conversation, a lot of building things together. The board is working on looking at our system of governance, how we organize sociocracy, doing some education and discussion around that. Membership is asking us how we build our connections, and they have some programs to help us better achieve that. Stewardship is talking about this question of how do we share responsibility? What does our relationship to Northwoods invite us into in terms of sharing our gifts? The Healthy Congregation team, which is relatively newly reformed. It had not been used for a few years, and so it got a little rusty and lapsed. But it's got 3 great members now who are excited about working with some of our existing ministry groups to identify the things that are going well, and also kind of help clarify some of the ways that the areas that we have some room to improve. And then our 8th principle conversation of, okay, we've adopted the 8th principle. We're working towards dismantling systems of oppression, anti-racism, etc. How does that play out in different areas of congregational life? So I imagine those are also conversations that are going to be happening in the different areas of different ministry groups and teams in the church. So I'm excited about that because we haven't had conversations as a congregation recently about who we are, where we're going, where does the energy lie in the congregation, and what are we working towards, right? Before you hired me as your developmental minister, there was a very extensive process of looking at the mission and vision of the church, rewriting the mission and vision of the church. David, I know you were involved in that. There was a revision of the bylaws. Margaret, I think you were involved in that. There was a lot of discernment, developmental goals and where we wanted to be, what were the things we were working on. But now that we're out of developmental ministry, it's time for us to have those conversations again. It's been 6 or 7 or 8 years, depending on how you look at it. And much of the congregation, not most of the congregation, a majority of the congregation, almost, has probably joined us in the last 6, 7, or 8 years and has not been part of these conversations. So I'm looking forward to asking those questions. Who are we now? Where are we going? Who do we want to be in the future? If this is how it is, how do we respond? What does it look like to go into this world and be a Unitarian Universalist? I'm hoping this is a question that we can all answer collectively and as individuals. Thank you for attending my presentation. Yeah, thank you. I'm going to share that with people, and I look forward to doing this stuff and also hearing from you guys. I hope I have not planned enough that we cannot kind of improvise as we go, because no matter how much I plan, we're definitely going to improvise as we go, because that's how it works. We make plans and then we work around them to the best of our abilities. So if there is something you'd like to know more about, I can certainly take questions. And if there's anything that you want to know about that was not in this, I'm happy to take questions about that as well. Questions, comments, wondering, things that aren't there that you hoped would be.
Something said Stardust.
Stardust Communion, yes.
I was waiting to hear what it was.
Oh, I meant to go back and tell you. So Stardust Communion is a tradition that I started when I got here. It's not like I'm the first person who's ever thought of it, but we do a glitter blessing. That's sort of the heart of the ritual, is this idea that we are all made of stars, right? We are all stardust, we share a common origin, and we share a common destiny, and there's nothing outside of that. There's a lot of Carl Sagan. Certain amount of scientific wisdom gets shared, sort of a celebration of cosmic inevitability, right? We are made of things that are here because of being deposited by stars, right? Being deposited by meteors, intersecting with this planet, right? Which is kind of an amazing thing if you think about it. The unlikelihood and simultaneous like inevitability of life. I could talk about that all day. So Stardust Communion is kind of a celebration of that atomic and chemical unity. How do you people who think
I forget what time of year that comes in.
It's in March.
Okay.
And now I took on this position of chair of the spiritual life ministry, which gets into this space. I'm interested to see where this goes. I'm going to be participating because, well, the post from Lama Owens that you put up pushes us into that space. When we liberals speak about fighting, we think of it maybe in Martin Luther King's terms, which is you place your body in a dangerous space,
right?
And you speak, and you take what's coming. And then there's the right-wing version, which is military, which is you're shooting and killing people that are threatening. He's somewhere else, I think. Not Martin Luther King space, not right-wing space either.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to unpacking what he means when he says fight.
Yeah, me too.
And I think that it's the same. I know you quoted two references, but part of what I heard today was communion, being together. It's that's a big part of it for me.
Yeah.
But also, as far as supporting LGBTQ issues, Black Lives Matter, brown, I don't always know. Sometimes I hear that stuff and I feel a little uncomfortable, and I don't always know how to address that. But one of the reasons I think it's important to keep talking about these kinds of things is that if we don't, those things are often used to divide us.
Yeah.
And it's in that vacuum that I think is the biggest danger right now. If we all talk about those things and all the other things.
Yeah.
And
that's
in my feeds on Facebook and Instagram, it used to be a new trend has started. There's no middle ground. You've got to say, no, that's not okay. You don't have to be militant, but you do have to say, no, I don't agree. And for 20 years, I mean, my whole adult life, I was like, my bubble is good. Right. And that's no longer an acceptable mindset. Because my bubble is still pretty good. But everywhere you go, the bubbles are just getting bad.
Yes. Yeah, I think more people's bubbles are experiencing.
And it's, but it was, a boil the frog kind of thing. I've been sitting in the water getting warmer and warmer, and now it's hot. And you're like, how did I miss this? I thought I was paying attention.
And that where it gets difficult in terms of delivering the message is that it's not necessarily still going to boil all at once, but in no more than a year, the soft landing scenarios are gone.
Right.
Yeah.
So we will end up. We can maybe preserve our individual integrity by making actively compromised moral choices.
Yeah.
Sign this loyalty pledge and you can keep your retirement. Where do we go? That's interesting times.
It is. I think a lot of people have a sense of the chickens are coming home to roost at this point, and the ways that sort of going along to get along has left us not terribly equipped for some of the things that we deal with now. And
Lama Owens' point rather sharply.
Yeah.
We're not equipped.
Yeah, and I would like us to be at least I feel like I would not be doing my job if I was not trying to at least equip us a little bit for better ways of responding to the world that we're going to be living in the next 5-10 years, because I don't know what it's going to look like, but I know that there are going to be challenges ahead, and it's not all going to look great, right? Whether it's political polarization or man-made climate change or multinational corporations influencing governments or loyalty pledges or whatever the case may be. There is a sense that the squeeze is coming at some point, which is I tend to be, like the hope and joy and like we can do this and like we'll figure it out. Human capacity, yay. But there's a part of me that has to say, and there's probably some shit coming down the pike that I'm not ready for. So how am I going to equip myself to minister to people in a world that I'm not prepared for?
Well, I think a big part of that equation for me is the support that we give each other. Yeah. I mean, we do have to sing loud and have coffee and laugh as well. I think that's an important part.
It is. And any one of these civil rights activist folks who is coming out of that Black church tradition, like Otis Moss, is going to tell you that if you don't dance and sing, you are not going to survive the revolution. So we have to do both. And how we do that, I hope will be part of those conversations that I think are going to be happening in the next few months. So, and not just the next few months, but hopefully we'll be kicking off some new ideas.
Well, I think this is a great start. I mean, we're kind of new to this, but
yeah,
I didn't, when you're new to an organization, when I walked in, I just thought, well, it's the way it's been going, and it'll always go, you just don't want it. But
yeah,
to be, kind of feel like I'm a part of a little bit of the future.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I also think, you're the reverend. Make your decisions, and I would be okay with that too. But it is a back and forth.
Yeah, it is. But it definitely
and I appreciate it.
It's definitely a back and forth. But one of the things that I was not prepared for was the fact that part of being the minister of a congregation is that you have placed your trust in what I care about. that you have to be your minister, you guys have you have implied at least, we trust you to be able to help us figure out what are the things that we need to be thinking about and how do we need to be thinking about them. And in turn, the things that you are thinking about, that you are caring about, are things that we should also think about and care about. And that's daunting. I'm not gonna lie. It's daunting. Like, wow, I don't have to have the answers, but I do have to be asking the right questions. And it's a tremendous amount of trust. The idea that you guys keep showing up every week to hear, and I realize it's not just to hear the wisdom that I am bestowing from the pulpit, but that's part of it. If I was doing a bad job up there, it would not be as easy for you to show back. So I'm glad it sounds good to you guys. We'll see where it takes us. And like you said, it's a very mutual effort. But I kind of feel like it's part of my job is to get the ball rolling, and having a loose plan is a good way to do that. Well, thank you very much for being here. Yeah,
thank you for doing it. But yeah, the topics are really good.
Yeah, good. I'm glad.
The next year brings.
Yeah.
Yeah, I may have to read along with the book just because of that amazing beard
Right?
and character
Yes.
on the cover.
Oh, I know. The cover of that book is super cool. And I've actually got them both here, either if anybody wants to flip through the chapters or anything.
Yeah, I bought that one.
Oh, good. Good.
Got a little started